The millionaire's wife accused the maid of stealing, prompting the millionaire to fire her. But what the maid revealed brought him to his knees in torment. Anna's mornings always began before the first light of dawn. The soft murmur of the city waking up served as her natural alarm. While the streets of New York were only beginning to stir, she was already on her way to the grand mansion where she worked. Her life was a constant struggle to balance responsibility and survival, caring for her ailing mother, Susan, while putting in long hours as a housekeeper for the wealthy Harrington family. John and Victoria Harrington's mansion was a striking sight in its neighborhood. Sharp, modern lines with glittering glass that drew everyone's attention. But for Anna, it was merely a reminder of the vast gulf between her reality and theirs. Inside those lavish walls, she mopped floors, dusted furniture, and moved about quietly, almost invisible. That was her job, after all, to blend into the background, just another part of the Harrington household's extravagant life. Victoria Harrington was the type who made sure everyone knew who was in charge. She moved through the house like royalty, the click of her heels echoing off the marble floors, her gaze cold and calculating. She rarely spoke directly to Anna. Her orders were usually passed down through the head of staff, and everyone knew better than to challenge her authority. John Harrington, on the other hand, was a different story. There was a distance about him, a guardedness that intrigued Anna. Unlike Victoria, he wasn't openly harsh, but he wasn't particularly warm either. Occasionally, he would acknowledge her with a brief nod, and every so often their eyes would meet from across the room, as if he were trying to remember something. She had always wondered why he treated her a little differently than the rest of the staff, like there was a hint of respect there, though he never expressed it. Despite the fleeting moments of connection, Anna kept her distance. She couldn't afford to stand out, not when her primary focus was on her mother's well-being. Susan had been seriously ill for years, and Anna's earnings barely covered the medical bills. Everything she made working for the Harringtons went straight to her mother's care, doctors, medication, and the rent for their tiny apartment. There was no room for mistakes. Losing her job would mean losing everything. That morning, the mansion's atmosphere felt more tense than usual. The staff moved about quietly, heads down, as if trying to stay unnoticed. Something was off, but Anna couldn't quite figure out what it was. It didn't take long for her to find out. She overheard whispers in the kitchen as she wiped down the dining room table. "Did you hear about the necklace?" one of the maids whispered. "The diamond one?" Another replied in a hushed tone. "Yeah, it's gone. Mrs. Harrington is furious." Anna's heart dropped. She knew the necklace they were talking about. It was one of Victoria's most prized possessions, frequently shown off at social events and meetings with John's business partners. Its value was so high, it could easily cover her mother's medical expenses for years. This was a serious issue, and if Victoria was on the hunt for someone to blame, it was only a matter of time. By the time Anna made her way upstairs to continue her work, she could hear Victoria's voice echoing through the hallways. The other staff did their best to avoid her, ducking into rooms or pretending to be busy. How could this happen? Victoria's voice cut through the silence, sharp and furious. "This is unacceptable. I want answers." Anna's pulse quickened. She knew that tone. It meant trouble was coming, and she didn't want to be anywhere near it. Just as she was about to slip away, Victoria entered the room she was cleaning. Her eyes locked onto Anna, filled with accusation. "You," Victoria barked, narrowing her eyes. "Where were you this morning?" Anna stood still, her cleaning cloth in hand, her mind racing. "I was downstairs," she stammered. "I didn't touch anything, Mrs. Harrington. I promise." Victoria stepped closer, her gaze icy and piercing. "We'll see about that," she hissed, before storming out. Anna's hands trembled as she resumed her tasks. She had a sinking feeling that things weren't going to end well. As the day dragged on, the tension in the mansion thickened. Anna could feel the weight of suspicion bearing down on her, the memory of Victoria's cold stare lingering. The entire household seemed on edge, bracing for the inevitable fallout. It didn't take long. That afternoon, as Anna was folding laundry, the door burst open, making her jump. Victoria stormed in, her face twisted with anger, with John trailing behind, looking troubled but silent. A few other staff members hovered in the doorway, their expressions anxious. Victoria wasted no time. "This woman," she accused, pointing a finger at Anna, "has stolen from me. The diamond necklace, the one John gave me for our anniversary, is missing. And she—" Victoria's finger jabbed in Anna's direction. "Is the thief." Anna felt as though she had been struck. She stood, stunned, unable to grasp what was happening. Her stomach twisted, and her legs felt like they might give out. "I didn't," she began, but Victoria cut her off sharply. "Don't you dare lie to me." Victoria's voice echoed off the walls, sharp and filled with fury. "We all know it was you. You're the only one who had access to my dressing room this morning. You've never been grateful for the opportunity to work here, and now you've shown your true nature." Anna's mind raced. She hadn't even been near Victoria's dressing room. She'd been cleaning the downstairs rooms all morning, but it didn't matter. Victoria's expression showed her decision was already made. John finally spoke, his tone softer but still firm. "Victoria, maybe we should—" "No," Victoria snapped, turning on her husband. "She needs to be fired, now. I won't have a thief under my roof." Anna felt like the ground had dropped from beneath her. Fired. This couldn't be happening. Losing this job meant losing everything. Her mother's care, their apartment, their entire fragile existence depended on this paycheck. Desperation flashed in her eyes as she looked at John. "Mr. Harrington, please, I didn't do this. I would never steal from anyone." "You have to believe me." For a moment, John met her gaze, and she thought she saw a flicker of hesitation, maybe even sympathy, but it disappeared just as quickly. He looked away, rubbing his temple as if trying to make the situation disappear. "I think—" He hesitated, looking between his wife and Anna. The room seemed to hold its breath. "I think it's best if we keep this quiet. Let's not make a scene." But Victoria wasn't interested in discretion. "Quiet," she scoffed. "This is my home, and I refuse to be humiliated by some maid who thinks she can take advantage of me. She needs to be gone. Today." Anna's heart raced. She needed to defend herself, but the words wouldn't come. She scanned the room, hoping someone would stand up for her. But the other staff members kept their heads down, avoiding her eyes. They knew better than to cross Victoria. "I swear I didn't do this," Anna said, her voice shaking. "I've always done my best here. I would never—" "Enough!" Victoria shouted. "Pack your things and get out. I don't want to see your face again." Anna's hands trembled as she took a step back, feeling the walls close in. Fired. Just like that, her world was falling apart. She opened her mouth to protest one last time, but before she could speak, John gave a small, reluctant nod. "Go," he said quietly, not meeting her eyes. "It's for the best." And just like that, it was over. The final blow. Anna felt a chill as reality set in. Her job, her lifeline, was gone, wiped away by one accusation. She walked out of the laundry room, her legs unsteady, her eyes stinging with tears she refused to shed in front of them. As she climbed the stairs to collect her things, she heard Victoria's voice, quieter now, but still laced with malice. "You're lucky I'm not calling the police." Anna said nothing. What was the point? She knew she was innocent. But in Victoria's world, innocence didn't matter. It was about power, and Victoria had all of it. In her small room, she packed her belongings into a worn bag. As she zipped it shut, her mind raced. What was she going to tell her mother? How could she break the news without causing her more stress? They were already struggling to get by. What would they do now? But as the weight of her situation pressed down on her, something deeper stirred. An old memory. A story her mother had shared years ago. A secret that might change everything. Anna wiped her eyes and stood up, determination hardening her resolve. She wasn't finished yet. Anna walked down the stairs, each step heavier than the last. The mansion, once her place of work, now felt like a hostile place. The walls closing in as she passed the other staff members. They offered her sympathetic looks, but no one dared speak up. They all knew better than to challenge Victoria's authority, especially after such a spectacle. Her bag felt heavy on her shoulder, but the weight in her heart was even greater. The thought of facing her mother, explaining why she lost the job, was unbearable. Susan's health was deteriorating fast, and without Anna's income, they were on the edge of losing everything. How was she supposed to face her now? Anna's mind was full of questions. Why had Victoria been so quick to accuse her without any proof? And why had John, who seemed more understanding, stood by and allowed it to happen? As she reached the front door, her hand hovered over the doorknob. This was it, the end of everything she had worked to maintain. Yet, something inside her refused to give up without a fight. The memory that had stirred earlier was clearer now, giving her just enough courage to turn back. With shaky steps, Anna walked down the long hallway leading to John's study. She didn't knock, just pushed the door open slowly and stepped in. John was sitting at his desk, staring at a paper with a troubled expression. When he noticed her, he looked up, surprised but not angry. "Anna," he said softly, as if he had expected this. "I thought you'd left." Anna's throat felt tight, but she forced herself to speak. "Mr. Harrington, I didn't take the necklace. I swear on my life. But there's something you need to know. Something I didn't want to mention before. But I have no choice now." John leaned back, his expression unreadable. "Go on." Anna swallowed, her heart pounding. She hadn't planned to reveal this in such a desperate moment, but there was no turning back now. "My mother, Susan, she always told me, before I was born, she had a relationship with a man who left before he knew she was pregnant. She never wanted me to find him, but she always mentioned his name." John's eyes narrowed slightly, but he stayed silent. "His name," Anna continued, her voice wavering, "was John Harrington." The room felt like it froze in time. John stared at her, his face paling. For a moment, he said nothing, and Anna feared she had made a terrible mistake. Maybe he wouldn't remember. Maybe it was all just a coincidence. John's voice came out in a whisper. "Susan." The way he said her mother's name, soft and filled with emotion, told Anna everything she needed to know. He remembered. "I loved her," he murmured, almost to himself. "It was so long ago. I didn't know. I never knew." Anna reached into her bag, her hands unsteady, and pulled out an old letter her mother had kept. The paper was yellowed and fragile, but the words were still readable. She placed it on the desk, watching as John picked it up slowly. His eyes scanned the faded handwriting. "I don't know why she never told you," Anna said quietly. "But this is proof." John read the letter in silence, his expression shifting from shock to something deeper, regret. Anna wasn't sure what to expect as she watched John read the letter. When he finally set it down, his eyes were filled with a sadness she hadn't anticipated. "I should have known," he murmured, his voice thick with regret. "But I was young and foolish. When her family tore us apart, I thought it was over. I didn't know she was pregnant." Anna's chest tightened. This wasn't how she had wanted things to unfold, but there was no going back now that the truth was out. She stood, feeling lost for words, unsure of what his next reaction might be. "I'm sorry," John said, moving closer, his voice heavy with emotion. I don't know what to say. All this time, you're my daughter." The words hung between them, loaded with emotion. Anna felt a lump forming in her throat, but she refused to cry. She had taught herself, long ago, how to hold back tears. "I didn't know either. Not until recently," she confessed. "My mother didn't want me to search for you, but after everything that happened, I couldn't keep it to myself any longer." John looked lost, running a hand through his hair as he tried to process this revelation. "This changes everything," he said, almost to himself. "I need to think. I need time." Anna nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I didn't come here expecting anything from you, Mr. Harrington. I just thought you deserved to know the truth, that's all." Before John could respond, the door burst open and Victoria stormed in, her face flushed with anger. She froze upon seeing Anna, and her eyes flared with fury. "What is she still doing here?" Victoria demanded. "I told you to get rid of her." John glanced from Anna to Victoria, and for the first time his voice held no hesitation. "We need to talk," he said firmly, "about everything." The room's atmosphere grew even tenser as Victoria's eyes darted between John and Anna, trying to grasp the shift in mood. John, for once, faced her with a determination she hadn't seen in years. Anna remained silent, her heart racing, knowing the next few minutes would change everything. "What are you talking about?" Victoria's voice was sharp. "What could there possibly be to discuss? I want her out of this house, John." John inhaled deeply, his gaze steady as he looked at Victoria. "There's something you don't know, something I just found out myself." Victoria's confident expression faltered, but she quickly masked it. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her tone icy. John's eyes met Anna's before he turned back to his wife, struggling to find the right words. "Anna isn't just a maid," he started, his voice steady. She's my daughter." Silence fell, thick and heavy. Victoria's face twisted in disbelief, a mix of shock and anger flashing across her features. She stepped back, as if physically repelled by John's words. "What?" she hissed, her voice barely above a whisper. "What did you just say?" John's eyes shifted to Anna, who stood frozen by the doorway, before returning to Victoria. "It's true. Susan, Anna's mother, and I were involved years ago, long before we met. Her family separated us, and I never knew she was pregnant." His tone softened as he continued. "Anna is my daughter." Victoria's shock quickly turned to rage. She laughed bitterly, shaking her head as if trying to reject the reality of the situation. "This is absurd," she snapped. "You actually believe this? She's lying, John. She's trying to take advantage of you." Anna's heart dropped, but she had expected this reaction. "I'm not lying," she said quietly, stepping forward. She pulled out the letter again, holding it toward Victoria. "This letter is from my mother. It's from John. It's proof." Victoria snatched the letter, her eyes scanning the words. Her expression grew colder with each passing second. When she finished, she tossed it back onto the desk as if it were trash. "This proves nothing," she sneered. "Anyone could have forged this. You're just some desperate girl trying to get a piece of what isn't yours." Anna bit her lip, holding back her frustration. She had anticipated resistance, but Victoria's words still cut deep. She turned to John, hoping for support. "Enough, Victoria," John said firmly, his voice steady. "I don't need any more proof. I remember Susan. And I remember everything that happened. Anna is telling the truth." Victoria's eyes flared. "So you're just going to believe this? You're letting her manipulate you? Just like that?" John remained resolute. "This isn't up for debate. The truth is the truth, whether you like it or not." The room felt electric with tension. Victoria stood, her fists clenched, as the weight of John's words settled in. After a moment, she sucked in a breath, her eyes hardening. She spun on her heel and marched toward the door, but not before delivering a bitter parting shot. "If you want to ruin everything we've built for some fantasy, go ahead," she hissed. "But don't expect me to stand by and watch." With that, she stormed down the hall, her footsteps echoing through the mansion. The room fell into a heavy silence once more. Anna felt the weight of all that had just transpired bearing down on her. She wasn't sure whether to feel relief, guilt, or something else entirely, but she knew one thing: nothing would ever be the same again. John let out a deep sigh and turned to Anna, his expression softer now. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice gentle. "I know this is a lot to take in, but I want you to know that I'm going to do everything I can to make things right. I should have known sooner. I should have been there for you." Anna's emotions churned inside her. She had imagined meeting her father countless times, but never like this. "I didn't come here to make things harder for you," she said quietly. "I just thought you deserved to know." John nodded, his face filled with regret. "I appreciate that. And now that I do know, we can't just leave things as they are. I want to help you. I want to be part of your life, Anna, if you'll let me." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. For the first time, she glimpsed the father she had longed for, the man who had been absent but was now ready to make amends. Before she could respond, there was a soft knock, and one of the staff entered, her expression cautious. "Mr. Harrington," she said hesitantly, "Mrs. Harrington has requested that her things be packed. She's leaving." John glanced at Anna, sighing heavily. "It seems things are changing faster than we expected." Anna remained silent, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. The truth had come out, and nothing would be the same again. The echo of Victoria's footsteps lingered long after she left, and the silence that followed felt almost louder. John stood by the window, staring out at the gardens he once took pride in. Now, the manicured hedges and pristine lawns seemed meaningless. His thoughts were consumed by the truth Anna had revealed. Anna, sitting quietly in the corner, felt the tension between them and wondered if she had made a mistake. But deep down, she knew that bringing the truth to light had been the right choice. Still, seeing the shock and regret on John's face made her heart ache. John turned from the window, slowly returning to his desk. The years he had lost weighed heavily on him. "Susan," he whispered, almost to himself. "I loved her. I really did." Anna didn't know how to respond. It was strange hearing her mother's name spoken with such tenderness. Susan had been so reserved, rarely speaking of the past. When she had told Anna about John, there had been a sense of finality, as if she had already accepted that chapter of her life was closed. John's eyes searched Anna's face. "I never knew," he said softly. "I didn't know she was pregnant. If I had known." His voice trailed off, leaving the unspoken words hanging in the air. Anna shifted uncomfortably in her chair. She had always imagined meeting her father, but not like this, so full of complexity and regret. "I understand," she said, her voice steady. "I don't blame you. I just thought you should know." John nodded, though the guilt in his eyes remained. "I wish I had known sooner. I would have done things differently. I would have been there for you and your mother." His words, though sincere, couldn't change the past. The years without him could never be erased, but there was something in his tone that made Anna believe he genuinely wanted to make amends. "I didn't come here to ask for anything," Anna said softly. "I just thought you deserved to know the truth, that's all." John leaned forward, resting his elbows on his desk, as if the weight of his thoughts was too much to bear. "No, Anna. You deserve more than that. I should have been there for you. For Susan." His voice cracked slightly, and he quickly cleared his throat. Anna shifted in her seat. She had spent years imagining this moment, but now that it was happening, it felt far more complicated than she had anticipated. The regret in John's eyes was real, but she wasn't sure it was enough to bridge the gap between them. Too much time had passed. Too much had been left unspoken. Sensing her hesitation, John stood and moved closer to her, lowering himself so their eyes were level. "Anna," he said softly, "I can't change the past, but I want to make things right. I want to help you and your mother. Please let me." Anna felt a lump in her throat as she listened to his offer. It was tempting, especially with her mother's health so dire, but something inside her resisted. Could she trust him after all these years of silence? "I don't know," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know if I can trust you. Not after everything." John nodded, his expression somber. "I understand, and I don't blame you for feeling that way. But I want to earn your trust, Anna. I want to be part of your life, if you'll let me." His sincerity caught her off guard. She had expected anger, denial, maybe even defensiveness. But not this. His vulnerability was unexpected. It was clear he wanted to make amends, but whether she could accept that was a question she wasn't ready to answer. "I need time," Anna said, her voice wavering. "I need to think about it." John nodded, standing up. "Take all the time you need," he said gently. "I'll be here whenever you're ready." Anna stood too, clutching her bag tightly. The conversation had been more emotional than she had anticipated, and she wasn't sure how to process it all. All she knew was that everything had changed in ways she could never have predicted. As she headed for the door, John called out softly, "Anna," and she turned back. "I'm sorry." His apology lingered, heavy with years of missed opportunities and regrets. Anna nodded, unable to trust her voice, and then left the room, her heart heavy with the weight of everything that had been revealed. The next morning, the mansion was tense and quiet. Anna had gone home after her conversation with John, but sleep had eluded her. She had spent the night trying to process everything, how the man she had unknowingly worked for was her father, and how he now wanted to help. It was all too much to absorb at once. As the first light of dawn crept through her window, Anna knew she had to speak with John again. There were still too many questions left unanswered, too many things to discuss. When she arrived at the mansion, the atmosphere was off. The staff moved about their duties with an uneasy energy, as if they sensed the upheaval beneath the surface. Anna made her way to the study, hoping to find John alone, ready for the conversation that would determine what came next for both of them. Anna's heart pounded as she absorbed John's words. The accusation about the necklace had seemed arbitrary at the time, but now, with John piecing it together, it felt like the final puzzle piece clicking into place. Victoria's hostility, her determination to discredit and ruin Anna. It all made sense. She had been desperate to eliminate any threat to her position, and in her mind, Anna had become the biggest one of all. "Are you sure?" Anna asked, her voice barely steady. Confronting her could make things worse. John nodded, his expression resolute but weary. "I have to. If what I suspect is true, then she's manipulated everyone in this house, including me. I can't let that go unanswered." He paused, his eyes meeting Anna's with a somber intensity. "This is more than just about the necklace. It's about righting a wrong." Anna's hands were still trembling, the reality of the situation sinking in. What will happen if you're right? What if she really did this? John leaned back, sighing heavily. "I don't know, but it's time the truth came out, no matter the consequences." He stood, his posture rigid with determination. "I'm going to speak to her now. Stay here. I don't want you getting caught up in this." Anna opened her mouth to protest, but stopped. She knew he was right. The confrontation could escalate quickly, and she didn't want to be caught in the middle of it. She nodded reluctantly, watching as John left the study, his footsteps echoing through the empty hallway. As the door clicked shut behind him, the silence of the room felt oppressive. Anna's mind raced. She tried to calm her thoughts, but all she could think about was what would happen next. If John's suspicions were correct, it would mean that Victoria's lies had gone deeper than she had ever imagined. It would mean that everything she had endured, the accusations, the threats, had all been part of a plan to protect Victoria's status. Minutes felt like hours as Anna sat alone, anxiously waiting for any sign of what was happening. She strained to hear through the thick walls of the mansion, but only muffled sounds reached her. She wished she could be a fly on the wall to know what was being said. But all she could do was wait, feeling a growing sense of dread. Finally, she heard footsteps approaching. The door opened, and John stepped back in, his face a mask of exhaustion. He rubbed his temples, looking like he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. "What happened?" Anna asked, her voice urgent. John sighed heavily. "She denied everything, of course. But I confronted her about the timing, about how quick she was to accuse you, and the fact that no evidence ever surfaced." He paused, looking down as if replaying the confrontation in his mind. "She became defensive, angry. When I told her I believed she set it up to get rid of you, she refused to answer and stormed off." But there was something in her eyes, Anna. Something that told me I was right. Anna's stomach twisted. "What now?" "I'm going to have someone search the mansion," John said firmly. "If the necklace is still here, we'll find it." He glanced at Anna, his expression filled with determination. "If she really did hide it, I'll make sure everyone knows the truth." A mixture of relief and anxiety surged through Anna. "Thank you, John. I know this can't be easy for you." He gave her a tired smile. "No, it's not. But you deserve the truth, and so does everyone else." As John left the room again, Anna felt a small spark of hope. Maybe, finally, things would be set right. She knew it wouldn't erase the pain and betrayal, but it would be a start. Hours later, the mansion buzzed with activity as the search began. Anna kept herself busy, but her nerves were on edge. She knew this was her last chance. If they couldn't find the necklace, Victoria's lie might stick. She tried to focus on the hope that John was doing everything he could to uncover the truth. Late in the afternoon, there was a sudden flurry of whispers among the staff. Anna's heart leapt as she saw John walking down the hallway, a small jewelry box in his hand. His face was a mixture of relief and vindication. He approached Anna, holding the box out for her to see. Inside was the necklace, its diamond pendant gleaming under the light. "We found it," he said, his voice firm, "hidden in one of Victoria's suitcases." Anna felt a rush of emotions, relief, vindication, and a deep sense of gratitude. "So, she really did hide it?" John nodded. "It's over. I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth. You've been through enough." As he turned to go, Anna placed a hand on his arm. "Thank you, John. I know this wasn't easy." He looked at her, his eyes softening. "It's the least I can do. I should have seen it sooner, but I'm here now." In the following days, the atmosphere in the mansion shifted, John made sure to clear Anna's name, speaking to the staff and ensuring that everyone knew the truth. Victoria's accusations lost their power, and the staff, who had once looked at Anna with suspicion, now regarded her with sympathy and respect. Victoria, on the other hand, remained secluded in her room, her presence reduced to a distant, looming shadow. The once powerful and controlling figure now seemed diminished, her influence waning. John approached Anna one evening, his expression thoughtful. "I have decided to file for a separation," he said quietly. "I can't stay in a marriage built on lies and manipulation. It's not fair to you, and it's not fair to me." Anna felt a pang of sympathy for him, but she knew it was the right decision. "I'm sorry, John." "Don't be," he replied with a sad smile. "This has been a long time coming, but at least now we can start fresh." As the weeks went by, John and Anna slowly began to build a relationship, one based on trust and honesty. It wasn't perfect, and it would take time, but they were willing to try. For Anna, it was the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with hope, family, and a sense of belonging she had longed for her entire life. Anna felt a wave of relief wash over her as Susan agreed to see John. It was a small step, but it felt monumental. "Thank you, Mum," she whispered, squeezing Susan's hand. The weight of all the secrets and lies seemed to ease just a little in that moment. The next morning, Anna woke up early, feeling both nervous and hopeful. The air was crisp, and the sunlight streamed through her apartment window as she prepared for what was to come. John had arranged to meet at a small cafe near the park, away from the mansion, where the three of them could talk without interruption. When she and Susan arrived, John was already there, seated at a table by the window. He stood as they approached, his expression serious, but warm. "Susan," he greeted softly, his voice heavy with years of unspoken emotions. Susan hesitated for a moment, then gave a small nod. John. The name hung in the air between them, carrying the weight of their shared past. They sat down, the tension palpable, but there was also a sense of something fragile and new, a chance for healing. "I owe you an apology," John began, his voice earnest. "For everything. I never knew you were pregnant. And if I had, things would have been different." Susan's eyes softened, but there was still pain in them. "It's been a long time, John," she replied quietly. "I chose to move on, for Anna's sake. I didn't want her growing up with the hurt of what happened between us." Anna watched her mother closely, seeing a strength she hadn't fully appreciated before. Susan had spent her life protecting her, even if it meant sacrificing her own feelings. John's gaze shifted between Susan and Anna. "I know I can't undo the past, but I want to be here for both of you now. I want to help." He paused, his eyes fixed on Susan. "If you'll let me." Susan studied him, her expression unreadable. "I'm not sure what that looks like," she admitted. "But if you're sincere, I'm willing to try." Anna felt a swell of hope in her chest. It wasn't a complete reconciliation, but it was a start. They had come this far, and it felt like the beginning of something different, something more honest. For the next hour they talked, about the past, about Anna's childhood, and about what the future might look like. John listened, asking questions about Anna's life and showing genuine interest in being part of her world. Anna felt the ice between them slowly thawing, replaced by a tentative warmth. As they left the cafe, John turned to Susan. "I know this isn't easy for you, but I promise, I'll do everything I can to make it right." Susan gave a small, tired smile. "I hope you do, John. For Anna's sake." The weeks that followed were full of cautious but hopeful steps. John made efforts to become involved in Anna's life, and though Susan remained guarded, she allowed him to spend more time with them. They met for dinners, visited parks, and slowly, Anna started to feel a connection with the father she never knew she had. Back at the mansion, things were different. Victoria's departure had left a palpable shift. The staff, once loyal to Victoria's strict routines, now seemed more relaxed under John's new, less rigid leadership. For the first time, the house didn't feel like a battleground, but a place where new beginnings were possible. One evening, as Anna and Susan were preparing dinner in their small apartment, John knocked on the door. He had a gentle smile on his face and a bouquet of flowers in his hand, one for Susan and one for Anna. "I thought maybe we could share a meal," he said, his tone hopeful. Susan glanced at Anna, and after a moment, she smiled. "We'd like that," she said softly. As they sat down together, the atmosphere felt lighter, and for the first time, Anna felt like she was part of a family, one that had faced its share of challenges, but was now trying to heal and grow together. It wasn't perfect, and there were still moments of awkwardness and unresolved emotions. But every day felt like a small step forward, a step closer to the life Anna had always dreamed of. She was no longer just the housekeeper's daughter, nor was she a stranger to her own father. She was simply Anna, a woman discovering her family, her history, and her place in the world, one day at a time. The next day, the air was thick with a mix of anxiety and anticipation as Anna braced herself for the meeting between her mother, Susan, and John. After years of silence and secrecy, they were finally coming face to face to confront their past. Anna felt the weight of it all, the burden of old wounds that had been left to fester for too long. She hoped today could be the start of healing. That morning, Susan was unusually quiet. She sat at the kitchen table, cradling a cup of tea, her eyes distant as she gazed out the window. Her face was pale, and the light that usually shone in her eyes was dulled, clouded by a mix of fear and uncertainty. Anna watched her, wanting to offer comfort, but understanding that her mother needed space to process everything. Susan had always been strong, but today she looked fragile. By the afternoon, John had arranged for a car to bring them to a quiet cafe, far from the grandeur of his mansion, a place where they could talk freely, away from the world of status and appearances that had once separated them. It was neutral ground, and Anna knew it was the right setting for what was about to unfold. When the car pulled up, Anna turned to her mother, who had remained silent for most of the ride. "Are you ready?" she asked gently, hoping to provide some reassurance. Susan took a deep, steadying breath, her hands trembling as she nodded. "I think so," she whispered, her voice barely audible but resolute. The cafe was small and cozy, nestled on a quiet, tree-lined street. It felt warm and inviting, the kind of place that made difficult conversations feel a little easier. As they walked in, Anna spotted John at a corner table. He looked up, his eyes a mix of anticipation and apprehension. When he saw Susan, he stood, and for a moment, the world seemed to pause. John and Susan locked eyes, their gazes filled with the unspoken history between them. Two people who had once shared love and deep connection now faced each other after years of separation and silence. Anna's heart raced as she watched, unsure of what would happen next. Susan took a tentative step forward, her expression guarded, but not hostile. John mirrored her movement, his face softening as he approached. Anna stood off to the side, holding her breath, feeling the intensity of the moment. When they finally stood in front of each other, the tension was almost unbearable. John's eyes were filled with regret, while Susan's held years of hurt and unspoken pain. "Susan," John said softly, his voice thick with emotion. Susan hesitated, her eyes flickering with a mix of sadness and nostalgia. Anna could see the struggle in her mother's eyes, the hesitation, the weight of everything left unsaid. "John," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The name alone seemed to carry the weight of years. Years of love, of heartache, and of loss. For a moment, they simply stood there, trying to reconcile their shared past with the present, searching for words to bridge the gap between them. John broke the silence first. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice cracking. "I'm so sorry for everything. I never knew about Anna. If I had..." Susan held up a hand, her voice steady, but filled with the hurt she had carried for so long. "Don't," she said. "Don't say you would have done things differently. We both know that's not how it works." John's shoulders sagged, and he nodded, accepting her words. "You're right. I can't change the past, but I want to make things right, Susan. For you, for Anna." Susan's eyes softened as she looked at Anna, who watched them from a few feet away, holding back her own emotions. "I kept the truth from her because I thought I was protecting her," Susan admitted quietly, her eyes returning to John. "But maybe I was wrong." John shook his head. "You did what you thought was best. I can't blame you for that. But now we have a chance to do something different, to be there for her, together." Anna felt a swell of emotion at his words, but she could still sense the tension between them. It was going to take time for the old wounds to heal. This wasn't a quick fix. It was the beginning of a long journey. Susan hesitated, her eyes moving between John and Anna. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "It's been so long, and there's so much that's been left unsaid." John reached out and gently took her hand. "We'll figure it out," he said, his voice filled with quiet determination. "One step at a time, for Anna." Susan looked down at their joined hands, her eyes welling with tears. She seemed to be weighing the years of pain against the possibility of a new beginning. Then slowly, she nodded. "Okay," she whispered, "one step at a time." John smiled, tentative but genuine. It was a small sign that, while things weren't perfect, there was hope. It was a start, a chance to heal and move forward. They all sat down at the table, and the conversation turned to the past. John apologized again and again, while Susan insisted they couldn't dwell on what was already done. Anna watched them both, feeling a mix of relief and sadness. The past couldn't be undone, but she saw the possibility of peace in the present. As the conversation wound down and they finished their coffee, John turned to Anna, his expression earnest. "I want to be a part of your life," he said, his voice soft but firm. "I know I've missed so much, but if you'll let me, I want to help you and your mother." Anna glanced at her mother, who gave her a small nod of encouragement. It was overwhelming, this new relationship with a man she had known only from a distance, but she felt ready to try. "I'd like that," she said softly, her voice filled with a blend of hope and uncertainty. "I'd like that a lot." John's face lit up with a warm smile, and Susan reached across the table to squeeze Anna's hand. In that moment, for the first time in years, Anna felt a glimmer of hope. It wasn't a perfect reunion, and they had a long way to go, but it was a start. And for now, that was enough. In the days that followed, Anna, Susan, and John began to navigate their new dynamic. John, true to his word, visited their apartment often, slowly integrating himself into their lives. At first, the visits were awkward, three people trying to find their footing in a relationship that had been fractured for so long. The weight of the past hung heavy over every conversation, but little by little, things began to shift. They found small moments of connection. They shared stories about Anna's childhood, and Susan and John reminisced about their time together before things had gone wrong. Anna learned more about her parents, and for the first time, she began to see them as people with their own stories and struggles. It wasn't easy, and there were moments of tension and discomfort, but there were also moments of laughter and warmth. Each visit felt like progress, a step toward healing the years of hurt and misunderstanding. The journey was just beginning, but with each small step, they were building something new. The conversations were light-hearted, but they were gradually laying down a foundation of trust. One evening, John showed up at their apartment, and Anna sensed from his voice on the phone earlier that this visit was different. He had asked to meet with both her and Susan together, and the anticipation in his tone made it clear that this wasn't just a routine visit. Standing at the door, John looked more relaxed than usual, holding a small box in his hands. Anna opened the door, letting him in. "Hey, Dad," she greeted him. The word still felt unfamiliar, but it was becoming easier to say with time. John's face lit up with a warm smile. "Hey, sweetheart, I'm glad you're both here." Susan sat on the couch, hands clasped in her lap, her gaze fixed on John. She was slowly getting accustomed to his presence again, and although the sting of the past had begun to fade, there were still times when a hint of sadness crossed her eyes, as if grieving the years that had slipped away. John moved to the small dining table and carefully placed the box down. "I've been thinking a lot about the future," he started, his voice calm but full of emotion. "About how I want to be a better father, a better person for both of you. I know I can't change the past, but I want to make things right." Anna and Susan exchanged a glance, unsure of where John was going with this. He took a deep breath before continuing. "I want to help you both in any way I can. And I know one of the biggest challenges has been the financial strain, especially with Susan's medical bills, so I've taken care of that." Anna's eyes widened in shock. "What do you mean?" she asked. John opened the box, showing a stack of documents. "These are all the outstanding bills for your mother's treatment. I've paid them in full." Susan gasped softly, her hand covering her mouth. "John, I don't know what to say." John's expression softened as he met Susan's eyes. "You don't have to say anything. This is the least I can do. I should have been there from the start, but since I wasn't, I'm doing what I can now." Anna felt overwhelmed. The weight of her mother's illness and the mounting medical expenses had been her constant worry for years. It was why she had worked so hard at the Harrington mansion, always terrified that she wouldn't be able to keep up with the payments. And now, with a single act, John had taken that weight off her shoulders. "Thank you," Anna whispered, her voice shaking. "You don't know how much this means to us." John reached out, taking her hand. "I'm just sorry it took me so long. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." Susan, who had remained quiet through most of the conversation, finally spoke up. "John, I never wanted you to feel like you had to do any of this. I kept Anna from you because I didn't want to complicate your life. But seeing you here, doing this for us, I realize now that I was wrong. I should have told you from the beginning." John shook his head, his face filled with regret. "No, Susan. You did what you thought was best at the time. I can't hold that against you. But now, we have a chance to make things right." The room grew quiet, the air heavy with unspoken thoughts, as the three of them sat together in the small apartment. The silence carried the weight of years of hidden truths, but despite the awkwardness of navigating this new relationship, there was a shared hope, one stronger than the pain of the past. Anna glanced between her mother and John. "We've all made mistakes," she said softly. "But I think we're ready to start fresh, to be a family, in whatever way works for us." John's eyes glistened as he nodded, his voice gentle. "I'd like that," he said. "I'd like that a lot." For the rest of the evening, they discussed the future. John talked about how he wanted to be more present in Anna's life, supporting her as she pursued her dreams, whatever those might be. Susan for the first time in a long while, seemed lighter, as if the burden of past regrets had lifted off her shoulders. As the night wore on, Anna felt a sense of calm she hadn't felt before. It wasn't perfect. There were still complicated emotions and an uncertain future, but for the first time, she felt a sense of belonging. She finally felt like she had a family, one that was real. When it was time for John to leave, he paused by the door, his expression full of gratitude and hope. "I'm here whenever you need me," he said, "and I'm not going anywhere this time." Anna smiled, feeling the warmth of his words. "We know," she replied softly. "We know." As the door closed behind him, Anna and Susan sat quietly in the living room, both reflecting on how much had changed in such a short time. It wasn't the life Anna had imagined, but it was one filled with new possibilities and hope. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe things could get better. In the following weeks, the shift in Anna's life was undeniable. What had once been a constant struggle to stay afloat was becoming a journey towards something new, something better. With John's support, the burden of her mother's medical bills was no longer a constant worry. The future no longer felt like an insurmountable climb, but a path she could see herself walking. John stayed true to his word, visiting often and spending time with both Anna and Susan. While his relationship with Susan remained complicated, they were finding ways to reconnect. Years of distance couldn't be undone in weeks, but they were learning how to be present in each other's lives. There were still moments of silence, wounds that needed time to heal, but they were taking steps forward, and that was enough for now. Anna, meanwhile, began to adjust to the idea of having a father who genuinely cared for her. John became a reliable figure in her life, offering not just financial support, but emotional support as well. He made it clear he didn't want to push too hard, that he was willing to go at her pace, and Anna appreciated the space to figure things out. After all those years of not knowing him, she needed time to understand how they fit into each other's lives. One bright afternoon, John invited Anna and Susan to his mansion for a small, intimate gathering, just the three of them. It was a quiet event, meant to mark a new chapter. As Anna walked through the grand halls, she realized she no longer felt like an outsider. This place, once filled with so much tension, now felt different. She belonged here now, not as a housekeeper, but as family. Sitting together in the sunny dining room, John raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he said, his voice carrying a hopeful note. "For all of us." Anna and Susan exchanged a look before raising their glasses too. "To new beginnings," they echoed, their glasses clinking together. It was a simple toast, but it felt deeply significant to Anna. It represented the healing of old wounds, the rebuilding of trust, and the hope for a brighter future. After the toast, John turned to Anna, his eyes warm. "I've been thinking a lot about your future," he said. "I know you've been working so hard for so long to take care of your mom, but I want to know, what do you want, Anna? What do you want to do with your life?" The question caught Anna off guard. It had been years since she'd thought about her own dreams. Her life had always been about survival, working, paying bills, making sure her mum was okay. But now, with those responsibilities easing, she realized she had room to think about what she wanted. "I don't know," she admitted quietly. "I haven't thought about it in a long time. I've just been focused on getting by." John nodded, showing understanding. "Well, now that things are a bit easier, maybe it's time to think about what makes you happy. What do you love doing? What excites you?" Anna paused, her mind drifting back to memories of her childhood, before her mother's illness. She remembered how much she loved to paint, how she'd spend hours lost in her art. But that passion had faded over the years, buried under responsibilities. "I used to love painting," she said softly, almost as if she was rediscovering the thought herself. I haven't done it in so long, but it used to make me really happy. John's face lit up. Then maybe it's time to start again. You're talented, Anna, and now you have the time. You could take some classes, explore it further. The idea sparked a small flame of excitement in Anna. It was something she hadn't dared to consider before, but now it felt possible. Maybe she could start painting again. Maybe she could even build a life around it. That sounds nice, she said with a smile. I think I'd like that. John's smile widened. Then it's settled. We'll make sure you have everything you need to pursue it. Susan, who had been quietly observing, reached over and squeezed Anna's hand. You deserve this, she said softly. Anna's eyes shone with emotion as she looked at both her parents. For the first time, she felt like she had the freedom to choose her own path, and she had the support of her family to do it. You've worked so hard for so long. It's time for you to do something for yourself. John's words hit Anna deeply, and her heart swelled with emotion. She had spent so much of her life taking care of others, her mother, her job, and even navigating her new relationship with John. But now, for the first time, she was giving herself permission to think about her own dreams and her own future. It felt unfamiliar but exciting, a feeling she was ready to embrace. As the afternoon continued, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. They shared laughs, exchanged stories, and, for the first time in what felt like forever, Anna felt a deep sense of peace. It wasn't just the relief of financial stability or knowing her mother was safe. It was the sense of belonging she had always yearned for, but had never quite found. Later, as the sun dipped low in the sky and they prepared to leave, John walked them to the door. He paused, looking at both Anna and Susan, with gratitude written all over his face. I just want to say, he began, his voice thick with emotion, that I'm so grateful you've both given me a second chance. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm going to do everything I can to be the father you need, Anna, and the friend you deserve, Susan. Susan's eyes shone with unshed tears as she smiled warmly. You've earned it, John. We wouldn't be here if we didn't believe in you. Anna nodded, her heart full, as she looked at the man who had once been a distant part of her life and now stood before her as someone she could truly call family. We'll get through this together, she said softly, one step at a time. As they left the mansion that evening, the world outside seemed brighter and full of promise. It wasn't a perfect ending. There were still challenges ahead and wounds that would take time to heal. But it was the start of something new. And for Anna, that was more than enough. Walking down the driveway with her hand resting lightly on her mother's arm, she felt a sense of hope she hadn't felt in years. The future was uncertain, but it was hers to shape, and for the first time, she felt ready to face it.